Today on NerdOut, Tx3. Welcome back to NerdOut, the show where we take a look at Cardano, we break it down but don't dumb it down. Today we are talking about Tx3, an interesting new way to build transactions on Cardano. And it has a very interesting problem statement. And as we talk about this particular library and set of tools, I have a special guest to bring up to the stage. I'd like to introduce you to Santiago from the TX Pipe team. Why don't you introduce yourself, Santi?
Hi, Andrew. Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Santi from the TX Pipe team. We build open source tools. We've been in the Cardano ecosystem for many years now. Hopefully today we can talk a little bit about this new thing that we are building, which is called Tx3.
Mm-hmm. Now, you guys have been working on this for quite some time, and it's gotten very, I saw it in the early days, some of the early demos. Talk a little bit about where you started and where you're at today.
Yeah, actually, we've been building this for over a year now. It's an ambitious project because I think that because it's an ambitious problem that we're trying to solve. And the broad topic that we're dealing with is developer experience, which I know yet again talking about developer experience, but for some reason we haven't fixed it yet in Cardano. It's still a pain point. Now, when we talk about developer experience, many times we put Web2 as the gold standard. We say we want to be as easy to build as in Web2, kind of like our North Star in terms of developer experience. But it's a little bit blurry. I think that it makes sense to drill down a little bit to see exactly what it is that we miss from that Web2 experience that we don't have when dealing with blockchain. And for that, I think that the best approach is to just tackle an example. Let's say that you're building a mobile app. I don't know, Andrew is building a mobile app, and you want to have an input form where the user types its address, and you want to have the typical drop-down where you see the different autocomplete options for the address that you're typing. So, Andrew, would you rather build your own Postgres database with millions of records with all of the addresses in the world, keep that updated, manage the infrastructure around it, the performance implications, keeping everything in check so that you can have an autocomplete? Or option B, would you go to some sort of API like Google Maps or Mapbox and integrate that? The question is obvious, painfully obvious. It doesn't happen just with this particular example. You can extrapolate that to payments with e-commerce with Shopify.
It's the standard buy versus build argument. Like anytime there's a problem, do I build it myself or do I pick up something either open source or buy off the shelf, something that will solve this problem for me? What's my cost benefit analysis? Yeah.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of components involved in that decision. Developers by nature want to just build their own thing. I don't know, that's goes with the territory. I think we just want to put our signature in everything and we want to build our stuff. That's one thing. But as you get more senior and older, you kind of start leaning towards okay, let's be pragmatic. But at the end of the day, what you learn is that if you want to fulfill a use case, if you want to build an application, what you have to do is compose functionality. It's not about building everything from scratch, but you will only get there with what you're trying to build, your core business, whatever that is, if you manage to compose the functionality, the features that are out there in order to implement a particular use case, a particular application.
Right.
Now, that is how Web2 works. And one curious thing about that is that if you take a look at the numbers, the ratio between service providers and people, developers integrating the solutions of those services, there is a huge asymmetry. I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people integrating Google Maps probably, and map providers, there will be a couple of them, Mapbox, Google Maps, maybe a few others. So the ratio is interesting there. And that, I think, goes to show that there is much more opportunity for innovation, for building things in the side of composing and integrating services, not just building that infrastructure.
Right.
Now, if we jump to blockchain and we zoom in into Cardano, what we have is, I feel that the inverse asymmetry. We kind of have multiple service providers, which they are not actually services. The word that I think makes more sense in our context is protocols. We have a lot of protocols. We have 2 or 3 DEXs. We have a prediction market. We have 2 or 3 lending protocols. We
At
have
least 10 DEXs, I'm sure.
List more to come. But at the end of the day, each of these teams, each of these instances, they are tackling the problem with vertical integration mindset, meaning that they will build the on-chain protocol, they will build whatever backend is required, and they will have their own front end and their own user experience.
Mm-hmm.
There are exceptions, obviously, but generally speaking, that's what we see. We see like vertically integrated DApps.
Yes.
And the asymmetry, the ratio between developers integrating and developers building infrastructure seems to be backwards, right? We seem to be having in our ecosystem much more of this protocol providers.
Yeah.
So why is that? Why is that we don't have people integrating things that we already have? I think there are multiple explanations, but one of the, to me, one of the main concerns is that the energy required to integrate one of these protocols is too high for any outside developer to just come here, read some docs, and call some agent and integrate the use case. If we go back to the Web2 analogy, if you wanted to fulfill this integration of an autocomplete for addresses, you will probably go to the Google Maps reference, the API reference. You will find the endpoint that you want. You will see that there is one called autocomplete, and you pass the query with the partial address, and you get a structured set of outputs with, I don't know, with the addresses, locations, and stuff. Mm-hmm. We're used to go to an API reference, see what the entry points are, analyze it from the perspective of the intent that I'm trying to solve, and then just call that. And that works because that API, that interface is hiding away all of the complexity, is abstracting away all of the complexity that it's running under the hood, and allows me to just care about the things that I should be caring about, which is my use cases and how those connect to the service provider. Mm-hmm. We don't have that in protocols in Cardano, in the apps.
Right. Yeah. So today on Cardano, we have this whole stack of deep knowledge that people need to do, even to build a simple transaction. You need to understand UTXOs and change and everything just to build a simple transaction. Whereas from the user perspective, they're just thinking, this amount is in my wallet. I want to move it over here. Like it's a very simple from a user perspective, but then that comes into the dApp area, and we have to have this crazy stack of knowledge just to do the most simple thing. And I think that's where you're targeting Tx3 to solve that problem.
Exactly, because we need something like an API reference for the protocols that we have in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Let's say that, I don't know, Bodega, so prediction market. Mm-hmm. If they could expose opening a position or participating in a position, opening a bid as an API, the amount of interesting use cases that you can think of, or I don't know, connecting that in a smart TV with option to put a bid, whatever, you're watching a game, I don't know. Or if you're a lending protocol and you're browsing through a real estate webpage and you're looking for your next apartment or home, and then you have a way to ask for borrowing money to pay for that thing, integrating into the UI. I don't know, just brainstorming here, but the amount of use cases that you can think of, if the effort required to integrate each of these protocols was low enough, I think is huge. And that's my hope for the next wave of developers coming into the ecosystem, that if we can present Cardano not as a UTXO blockchain, which it's good, and there is a use case for protocol authors to come here and build infrastructure, but for the masses, for the developer masses, I think that we should present Cardano as this rich layer of APIs that provides use cases, specific use cases. Make a swap, ask to borrow money, add liquidity to a pool, open a position in this market. That's the layer of abstraction that we should be working on and presenting Cardano to the outside world. If you're in a booth in an event and somebody comes and says, hey, what can I do with Cardano? I don't think you are going to get much adoption by explaining how a UTXO with a datum and a redeemer works. You need to get out of that conversation saying, hey, here's the API reference for all of the functions that you can call. That's my personal perspective. And the reason why we've been working on this idea of Tx3 for quite some time now. So the usual way that people see Tx3 is as a transaction builder. And to some extent, it is that. But the main value proposition, it's actually to be an interface definition language of protocols. So that we have a standard way for a protocol author, for the infrastructure providers in our ecosystem, to describe how to interface with their protocols from a programmatic perspective, not from how do you click on the front end to make a swap, but rather here is a, let's call it a function that you just call, and that represents making a swap. And these are the parameters, and this is the output like you can expect. And if we can provide that, then the effort of integrating something just goes, I don't know if it goes to zero, but it's one prompt away from.
Well, and you can also bring all of those experiences closer to the user. You could have, if all of those protocols are defined, you could bring all those experiences into the wallet itself. I know there's a lot of stuff you can do in wallets on other chains, make a swap, buy this token, do this thing where they don't even know they're interacting with these protocols. The wallet could be the catch-all dApp at that point. You don't need, I go to this website to do this thing, this other website to do this thing. If everything defined their protocol in Tx3 and the wallet just implemented all of these protocols in Tx3, they could really do everything right there from the wallet, which I think is a much better user experience.
Yeah, totally. With that description, you went even one step further, which is, what if suddenly we have semantic context instead of just UTXOs and hashes and policies IDs? Because one thing is to let the user try to interact with, a DEX by expecting them to input the exact structure of the datum and the policy ID that matches the liquidity pool and all of the little details. And that won't happen. But that's certainly not the way that an end user or a wallet needs to interact with something like that. But if suddenly what you have is a function that says make a swap, and this is the parameters are token A, token B, and the amount that you want to swap, suddenly that context allows for a lot of interesting automation on top of that. Either developers that just want to hard code that into specific use cases and applications, which is what I was briefly describing. But then what you say, hey, suddenly a wallet doesn't have to understand all of the intrinsics of the protocol. They just have to understand the surface, and suddenly they could be connecting directly from the wallet these functions. Or
and you talked earlier about composability on Web 2. This would make all of our protocols much more composable because if I know the surface of this DEX, if I know the surface of this lending protocol, then I could build my own dApp, or the wallet could build a dApp to connect those two. Whereas normally it'd be like, go to this website, do this swap, take out a loan, go over here, do this swap, put it into this vault,
Exactly.
it's a very nerdy type of process for a user to go through. Whereas if you can bring that composability into one dApp that's like, oh, get some ADA, click one button, and now suddenly I'm earning money on, because I've swapped into USDM, provided liquidity on Fluid tokens, and, or provided a loan on Fluid tokens, and now I'm just earning dollars back. And then, when I exit my position, it'll swap it back to ADA or something. Like, you could build that whole flow as a dApp that does nothing more than composes other dApps.
Exactly. And that is at your fingertips, because you can now have this surface of the protocol, which is something that currently we don't have. Because if you try to implement the same thing now, what you will end up having to do as a developer is having to understand the intrinsics of each of the protocols, meaning I have to know the shape of the datums, I have to understand the shape of the redeemers, I have to know the sequence of inputs that I have to put in this particular transaction to make it do the thing that I want to do. In other ecosystems, example EVM, they kind of get that out of the box for the wrong reasons, but they get it out of the box because in EVM, you're forced to put all of your business logic on chain. So that is not a good thing, at least from my perspective. We should try to keep as much off-chain as possible. And it adds elements of non-deterministic behaviors inside of the business logic. So putting things on chain and computing a lot of things on chain, it's not a good thing. But a side effect of that is that to interact with contract with the protocols, they are forced to expose what the interface is. In EVM, they have this concept of an ABI, which is the binary interface for one of the Solidity smart contracts. And those interfaces are organized with the same level of abstraction that we are discussing here. They say make a swap instead of the nuances of the internals. So we don't have that in Cardano. But the solution is not to be more like EVM in the sense of adding more on chain. What we need is some way, standardized way of describing these interfaces so that that knowledge is surfaced to any developer that wants to integrate, and you can have the same developer experience as they have in EVM, but without all of the downsides that putting things on chain brings.
Absolutely.
And that's the
so that's exactly what Tx3 is it's defining these interfaces for your protocol. Can we dive into some examples or maybe some documentation on how this works?
Yeah, sure. If you can show my tab.
There we go.
So here, if you want to just understand a little bit of the internals of the language, you can go to our docs page, which is docs.txpipe.io/tx3. Maybe we can share a link. And here you will find a quick start, the language guide. But let's go into the quick start just so that we get a sense of what the actual syntax looks like. So hopefully this is readable, but we can zoom a little bit. So what we have here is an example of a TX3 file, which is kind of like the hello world of TX3 in blockchain. Our hello world in Cardano would be to transfer ADA. So here what you're seeing is that this is specifying the parties that are involved in the protocol, a sender and a receiver. And then what you have is this idea of a transaction, but that has a named attached to it and parameters. So now transactions, which are not actually concrete transactions that you can submit, but these should be thought as transaction templates, now become these functions that you can call. And this becomes the outside surface of the protocol. This is
I don't
basic
see
protocol will
anything
be
about UTXOs here. I don't see.
right.
Yeah, it's all abstracted away.
So I've taken it away, and I would even dare to say that anything that is inside here is implementation details, which are for the protocol author, the ones defining the protocol, to fill in. The thing that you need to know as a integrator, meaning that developer that wants to use this protocol somewhere, is this signature up here, which is saying, okay, there is some function called transfer that takes quantity as a parameter, and that's it. Because by having this, the toolchain, the Tx3 toolchain, because it has a lot of components, can do, for example, code generation of the transaction building code in Rust, Python, Go, and TypeScript. And we are adding a few more. We are going to be adding Kotlin, hopefully, and Java and Swift. But those are on the roadmap and not currently available. But the fact is that regardless of what your stack is, if you're a Rust developer or you want to integrate this in a web application or in a mobile application, now by having this definition of the protocol, you can co-generate the transaction building stuff. And I think that's a very powerful thing. Mostly when, for example, I'm switching tabs here. When you start thinking of this authors, these protocol providers, to start sharing their definitions in a way that are discoverable and accessible by developers. So here, what I'm showing is something that we haven't released yet. It is a registry of protocols that we, as TXPipe, we are reverse engineering the protocols that are out there already in the ecosystem and putting them in this registry for developers to interact directly. And we're doing this with the blessing of each of the protocols. We are discussing with each of them to see if they follow the essence of what they were looking for in their own protocols. Some of them already have a few APIs and SDKs that overlap, but they all agree that having this shared view of the interface across the ecosystem is really powerful. Because now that you have this, for example, let's go into the Indigo protocol. What you get here is README with a human readable description of what the protocol is about. Then if you switch to the protocol tab, what you will get is a definition. This is lacking a little bit of the doc strings, which are coming. But what you get is, again, a human readable description, but much more strict of what the transactions inside this protocol are, which are the parties that are involved, the parameters that are required for this particular function / transaction, the types, what the inputs and outputs are for this particular transaction, and then you can move forward and see all of the involved intents or actions that you can execute in this particular protocol. For example, here it's create a CDP in the context of Indigo. Let's say that we go to something like Bodega. What you will get as intents these transactions is, for example, buy a position yes or buy a position no, or create a market and so forth. So now, instead of having just UTXOs and datums, what you have is this description of each of the protocols. Here, you can also inspect what the Tx3 file looks like for this particular context. You can see that you can also define custom types and complex types. And then when you get to this is a long one, when you get to the transaction, here you see that what the actual definition of the examples I was showing before, how they are defined in this particular context. But the fun part, I believe, is this tab, which is the SDK tabs. Meaning that now what you get is, for each of these protocols, meaning Bodega, Indigo, Strike, the ones that we currently have integrated, you suddenly automatically have this set of SDKs in TypeScript, Rust, Go, where in order to call one of these functions, this is the snippet that you have to call, and that's it.
That's amazing.
I think this is it's not finished. We are still have a lot of room for improvement, but I think this is the essence of what we want to show. This idea that copy pasting the snippet could abstract away all of the complexity of interacting with this particular protocol. Magic.
Very cool.
This.
Yep. And then because of this, you can very easily, as you can see, compose these different protocols together to do, higher level dApps that are made up of other dApps and flows. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And it will be just
that's incredible.
That composition could happen at the developer on the developer side just by calling different functions depending on what they want to compose and connecting the parameters and the outputs from one to the other. So I think it's important to mention that the outcome of this particular snippet that we are seeing here will be an unsigned transaction that then you as the developer are responsible for the site how that moves forward. Maybe you relate that to a Wallet Connect inside a web application, or maybe you have some sort of server-side workflow that deals with that signature problem, or maybe you're composing something that happens on your own private infrastructure and then you sign it on the backend side. That this is returning the final concrete zero transaction that then you can use to move forward with the submission.
Excellent. Very cool. Is there anything else you wanted to share about TX3 or any call to action you have for our listeners today?
Yeah. So call to action. This is very new. We are putting a lot of sweat and effort into this thing. I really believe that adoption will come from the perspective of these new users that want to build use cases. And hopefully we need to have protocol builders and infrastructure builders in the ecosystem. But the next wave, I think it will happen through here. So the ask would be go to the docs, see if it makes sense, give us some feedback, maybe share it with some developer that at some point you wanted to get to know Cardano, but you never had the chance to provide them with a concrete small call to action, and this might be one that fits the bill for that kind of thing.
What about existing protocol builders that aren't yet on TX3 or in the registry? Can they come and start to define their own? Their own stuff.
For sure. And they can reach us on our Discord or just ping me on any of my socials. And we are happy not only to show you how to do it yourself, which would be a dream come true, but also even to help with the reverse engineering of what it's out there. We've been doing that with several teams, and we can keep doing it with others. So ideally, if you don't have the bandwidth, you can still reach out to us, and we will put the effort to set up your project in the registry.
Excellent. Okay. I think we're getting to the end of our time here, but I will make sure to put the link to all of this stuff in the video description. And thank you for your time, Santi. And it's always great to see you and talk to you. And with that, nerd out.